My name is Raquel Rolnik. I am an architect and urban planner based in São Paulo, Brazil. And presently, since 2008, I was appointed as the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing. The Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing is one of the special procedures mechanisms that the Human Rights Council has created in order to monitor the implementation of the international resolutions and laws and covenants that all the countries have voted and ratified. So my main task is to go to countries, to do thematic report and to report back to the Human Rights Council in Geneva what is the present state of the implementation of one particular right, the right to adequate housing as an essential component of an adequate standard of living.
Thank you a lot. And if you could talk a little bit, you have been to many countries, also probably to the countries of the decade for the Roma inclusion. And could you speak a little bit of those countries that you have visited and the situation there? If you could maybe pick up a particular country whose government has a strong will to change anything about the housing and the Roma issue, especially those two related.
Unfortunately, as rapporteur, we do only two country missions a year. And up to now, I had not the opportunity to visit one of the countries that are part of the Decade Initiative. So most of the information I have of the Roma situation was an information sent to me by Roma organizations, by NGOs that work with them, by international bodies that are seeking and researching on that, and then sending me out information. I had a mission in Croatia last year, in 2010, and I will present the report of Croatia, and in Croatia I was very surprised to see a Roma settlement in the outskirts of Zagreb, which has conditions worse than conditions that I have seen in many Latin American or African or Asian countries during my missions. And I was very surprised because, of course, we are talking about Europe, we are talking about a continent that has been a kind of a model for the human rights promotion and protection.
Basically, there is one more question we would like to know and ask, and that is, what do you expect from this conference and from this meeting of various organizations and people who are involved in the problematics of Roma housing and the legislation and human rights issues? What do you expect from it?
I'm very happy that I was invited to this conference, so because I had a chance to see how much difficult is the challenge to go beyond declarations of nations towards implementation on the ground. Of course, we are not talking about the simple things. We are talking about deeply rooted discrimination. We are talking about deeply rooted tensions that are there for centuries in the territories, and you cannot change that by decree. But at the same time, exactly because of that, I think to implement a real policy to include Roma, to integrate Roma, access to housing, inclusive housing, not segregated housing, is very, very important. And most important to that, I think it's very important to halt immediately forced evictions of Roma settlements from the places they have been living for decades or for centuries. I think the idea of a progressive realization of the right to housing, it's a very good ground base to ameliorate step by step the place where people live without the need to resettle, to evict, and therefore to create a lot of troubles for these communities. At the same time, it's very important for the future that housing policies are in place in order to really provide people with the choice of living not in a segregated ghetto, but in an inclusive community with all the infrastructure of the equipment, all the access to the means of livelihood, jobs, etc.
Yet it seemed to me when I heard the contributions to this conference that the legislation is here, the EU legislation, the national legislation that supports this idea to solve the biggest problems of the issue of housing and Roma community and the segregation. But it's the level of municipalities that kind of puts the obstacle to the whole process. And do you think this conference is going to give answer to this?
I see that there are two problems here. One problem is to go to the local level, to the municipalities. This is one thing. But another thing, which is very important, you can have a legislation against discrimination, a legislation pro-integration and so far. But if your overall urban and housing policies for the country is the one that promotes segregation and promotes exclusion because it's solely based on the market value of land, on real estate promotion, on doing business, then you are at the national level, you have contradictory messages to the municipalities. So I think it's very important to have the right message to the municipalities, the right means, but also it's very important to reappraise national housing policies. National housing policies in Europe today are not directed towards protecting the poor and provide them with affordable housing.